In the next stanza, Gray begins, that is stanza number 12. Perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire. So deliberately he is referring to the impact of spiritualism, right? That means the person's neglected spot. Why it has been called neglected spot? Because it is the elegy written in a country churchyard, and in a country churchyard where the cemetery is, you cannot find that there are multiple persons or a number of persons who are coming and who are actually paying visits. So that's why this particular place is being called neglected. And here it says that perhaps in its neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire. You know what is celestial? Celestial, this very term is opposing to the term terrestrial. If terrestrial is signifying something earthly, then celestial it is referring to something heavenly. So what it says, perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire, hands that the rod of empire might have swayed or waked to ecstasy the living lyre. So the rod of empire, it is referring to the scepter, because it is being related to the monarchy, it is being represented to the king. So it says hands that the rod of empire might have swayed or waked to ecstasy the living lyre. So the reference to lyre, again, it is referring to it is being pointing towards the concept of songs and maybe the poets or poetry in general. But knowledge to their eyes her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, did never unroll. Chill penury repressed their noble rage and froze the genial current of the soul. So what it says in stanza number 13, it is being personified, and it says that knowledge to their eyes her ample page. Ample page, this very term is referring to the large book, you see. So it says that knowledge to their eyes her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, and that means filled with the age-old wisdom. So rich with the spoils of time did never unroll, because it is never laid. Chill penury repressed their noble rage and froze the genial current of the soul. That means knowledge remained close there. Okay, because penury, this very term, it is referring to poverty. These personalities, that means in spite of all the negative aspects that have been ascribed to these personalities, you can find that somehow these persons are knowledgeable. That means knowledge was always present within them. So that's why it says knowledge to their eyes her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, did never unroll. So ultimately chill penury repressed their noble rage and froze the general current of the soul. Full many a gem of purest ray serene. Serene means something related to spiritualism. Serene, that is the very term that have been associated with some spiritual perspectives, and some Christian perspectives are all together. So here it says, full many a gem of purest ray serene. Purest ray serene. The dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. So that's why the references of the oceans and the gems that have been taken from the bed of the oceans. So these personalities have been taken as considered as like the gem. But in spite of all these things, the transience is always being incorporated in this particular stanza. What it says, full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air. So what it says here, ultimately, here it is being pointed out that there are multiple references of the gems, but the gems reside in the dark caves of the ocean bed. Okay? And full many a flower is born to blush unseen. That means there are, in the jungle, in the wood, you can find that there are numberless flowers are blooming. But it remained unseen because it is beyond the grasp of the human's reach. And fundamentally, these have been at waste with sweetness on the desert air. So somehow, in stanza number 14, in 13 and 14 obviously, Gray is trying to point out that in spite of having some potentialities, in spite of having some positive traits within these characters, they actually lived completely unseen. Okay, and they remained far from the general eye, and that's why it is the kind of a transience that has been taken into consideration, and somehow they have not been taken as fundamentally important to the personalities. That means they had the potentialities, they had the capabilities, but in spite of having such capabilities, in spite of having such potentialities, they remained completely unseen from the general people. That's why their potentialities, their capabilities have not been noted in the history, in the annals of history, you see. And that's why here it says in stanza number 15, some village Hampden that with dauntless breast the little tyrant of his fields withstood. Some mute, inglorious Milton here may rest, some Cromwell guiltless of his country's blood. So in stanza number 15, it is very important for your objective questions, obviously. Here it says, there are three names that have been taken into consideration. And what are these? The first one is Hampden, the second one is Milton, and the third one is, obviously it is referring to Oliver Cromwell. Yes, the reference to Cromwell. So Hampden, Milton and Cromwell. You know about Milton. Who is Milton? It is not needed here to discuss about Milton because you know everything about Milton. You know something about Oliver Cromwell because Cromwell actually led the government. It is opposing monarchy and the beheading of Charles I, and Cromwell and his government are establishing the Puritan regime, obviously, at the time. If I consider the term regime being used there, but it is called the typical Republicans that have been taken into consideration. But who is this John Hampden? John Hampden was an English politician, you see. His refusal in 1636 to pay ship money tax, which was unjustly imposed by Charles I, made him a national figure because he refused them, right? Charles I's attempt to arrest him made the civil war inevitable. He raised his own regiment on the outbreak of hostilities and on June 18, 1643 was mortally wounded at the skirmish of Shalgrove Field in Oxfordshire. So Gray, by using the name like Hampden, Gray by using the name like Milton is also being taken as a person, an important person who actually directly took part in the movement. And you know that in the Oliver Cromwell regime, in the Oliver Cromwell government, Milton was an important character. He was taken to be an important minister in his cabinet. So why Gray is referring to Hampden, why Gray is referring to Milton, and why he is referring to Cromwell, that is Oliver Cromwell? Because these are the characters who actually changed the world. Okay, because it is a pre-romantic period, somehow that is the fundamental period when we can find that Gray had in mind the typical changes of the world, because they were, Oliver Cromwell called himself as the Lord Protector. And they are the personalities following whom the worlds got changed. Okay, so that's why here it mentions that some village Hampden that with dauntless breast, because Hampden was a person who could directly oppose the king, that is Charles I. The little tyrant of his fields withstood. Some mute inglorious Milton, that is here why it is called the mute inglorious, because the capabilities of Milton was always being present within these personalities. But in spite of having such personalities, in spite of having such capabilities, they remain mute. Okay, these personalities remain mute, and they are called inglorious because it is undistinguished. It's because the glory was not being associated with these personalities generally. Some Cromwell guiltless of his country's blood. So these are the personalities with whom Gray is deliberately comparing Hampden, comparing Milton, comparing Oliver Cromwell. So it might be possible, Gray was with the particular view, that it might be possible that these personalities who had the capabilities like Hampden, who had the potentialities like Milton and Oliver Cromwell, they are, guiltless of his country's blood. They are lying there in the country churchyard, in the cemetery behind the churchyard. So that's why it says, some village Hampden that with dauntless breast, the little tyrant of his field withstood. Some mute inglorious Milton here may rest. Some Cromwell guiltless of his country's blood. The applause in the next section, that is stanza number 16, it says, the applause of listening senates to command. That means somehow the persons or these personalities have the potential, as I've discussed some now, And here it says the applause of listening senates to command. That means if the persons could display their potentialities, if the persons who are dead at this moment could display their capabilities, it might be possible that they would receive the applause of the listening senates. Senates, that Oliver Cromwell actually led them. So the applause of listening senates to command, the threats of pain and ruin to despise, to scatter plenty over a smiling land, and read their history in a nation's eyes. So what it represents here, that they had the power, they had capabilities, but ultimately they have not become a person like Oliver Cromwell, or maybe an orator like Hampden, right? So what is the reason, or what are the reasons why they didn't choose the path of this life? The line is being, one particular phrase is being reciprocated through this is stanza number 16, and it will be continuing in stanza 17, 18, 19, anything else. What is the phrase? The phrase is, their lot forbid. Just look at stanza number 17, the first three words, their lot forbid. Lot means fortune, bhagyo. So what it says, their lot forbid. That means in spite of having the potentialities, their humble lot stood in their way. That's why they couldn't become a person like Hampden. That's why they couldn't, express themselves to become an orator that the senates could applaud. So they had the power, but they overlooked everything. So that's why it says their lot forbid. Nor circumscribed alone, nor restricted alone, their growing virtues, but their crimes confined. So here Gray is trying to point out one thing, that if they were being projected as like Oliver Cromwell, it might be possible that there are some positive traits in Oliver Cromwell, you see. There were some positive traits in Hampden, you see. But ultimately, when Oliver Cromwell actually moved against monarchy, when Oliver Cromwell killed Charles I, can you not find any particular reference where the people, the general people, died? So that's why with every kind of conversion, with every kind of change, you have to identify that with the positive traits being present, there are some negative aspects that have been taken into consideration. So what it says here, their lot forbade, their fortune forbade everything. Not circumscribed alone, not restricted alone. Their growing virtues. That means their possibilities were not being restricted alone to their growing virtues. Rather, their crimes confined. That means if they would become the persons like Cromwell, if they would become the persons like Hampden, then ultimately the crimes would also confine them to the general forms. So they are like forbade, not circumscribed alone, their growing virtues, but their crimes confined. Forbade to wade through slaughter to a throne. When you are becoming a king, when you are becoming a general, or maybe a high-rated politician, you need to slaughter, and with that particular form of slaughtering, you are gradually getting your throne. Somehow, you may be with a particular view that Oliver Cromwell was not a king. Okay, he was a leader. He was a leader of the typical Puritan government. But somehow, can you not find that the slaughtering was altogether being present in this particular process? Because Oliver Cromwell killed Charles I, and then only he could become successful in leading them. So, forbade to wade through slaughter to a throne and shut the gates of mercy on mankind. That means what it says, that somehow these personalities were different. It is not simply their lot forbade, rather they chose their path. They chose their ways, because they chose the simple life. They chose the humble life. They chose or they didn't choose the particular life of a tyrant that could kill others and becoming the powerful personalities. That's why these persons have to be treated with some more importance, you see, because they had some possibility, okay, they had the capabilities, they had the potencies, and altogether they were the good personalities because they had the mind. They were not inhuman like other personalities, right? So it is stanza number 17.